Trust me, I looked for it. But Michael, he was drafted by the Expos in '95. He really bled the Expo colors. And he got to see this team under 3 different ownership groups, which is something that not a lot of players can say. So I can't think of a more perfect ball player to be here today. So Michael Barrett is our fourth round.
It's like my tombstone here.
Well, no, it's all good. So yeah.
Baby
You're still here, it's okay.
I was a baby when I died here.
So welcome, gentlemen. As I said, we've got a lot of interest here. A lot of people are here for this panel, for the Expos panel. And we have a lot to talk about. So I'll start off with the doozy here, okay? The second to last series at home, Phillies were in town, and Larry Bow was asked about Montreal because, he's got to be here as a player and as a manager. And he said this quote, he said, "This was a good baseball town. I don't know what happened." And to me, it's the perfect tragic quote that defines the Expos. So I'll start with you, Serge. What happened?
What happened? By the way, my English is not perfect, especially in front of a crowd like this. I just want to apologize, but I'll do my best. I might sound like a chainsaw once in a while, but you're going to get used to it. What happened? A lot of stuff happened. Boa was right. It used to be one of the best franchise in baseball. I'm talking about late 70s, early 80s. They used to draw $2 million a year. In fact, at one point, the Expos were named the #1 team in Canada. And I'm not bullshitting you. It's exactly what happened. And I mean, people were just
Your
crazy.
English is fine there, too.
No, they were crazy about the team, and then a lot of stuff happened. I don't blame the people. I just think that there was too many broken promises, too many deceptions. The strike of '94 hurt, no doubt about it. They were leading the league. They were leading Major League Baseball at the time. They had the best record in baseball. But I think that '95, the spring of '95, hurt as much as the strike because there was that fire sale when they let go 4 key players, popular players. I'm talking about Larry Walker, who was on his way up, Marcus Grissom, who was probably the best center field in baseball in the National League at the time, Ken Hill, who was a pretty good starting pitcher, and, of course, John Wetland, who was at the time the best reliever in baseball, and, in fact, the year after he won the World Series with the Yankees. And I think that fire sale hurt as much as the strike, and I think that a lot of people lost confidence in the management. For them, it was how many times can you hit the fans? The 1-2 punch, they had it about 25 times in Montreal. I mean, a lot of them just lost confidence in the management. That and, of course, the ballpark downtown was probably a dream, but I still believe it would have saved the franchise. I think in that regard, the businessmen in Montreal, let's put it that way, they want to do it at first, but I think the money was there, but the will wasn't. Let's put it that way. They start the game, but after the 6th inning, they look in the bullpen to see if they could find somebody who could help them out. And then Jeffrey Loria and David Sampson came in. They gave the ball to those guys. And from that point on, I think that was the beginning of the end for the Expos. I'm not blaming Loria and Sampson. Those guys are business people, businessmen. They were there for make money. But I don't think they were the guys who want to save baseball in Montreal. That's it.
Yeah, not an easy answer.
Thank you.
Dave, you also saw this team, from the start. One thing that, when I was doing some research, listening to some old games, listened to a game from '69 that you're calling, and one thing that struck me was the station ID was coming to you from Albany, New York, okay? And, you never want to blame Charles Bronfman. He put so much money in the team and so much stuff in, but during his era, was there a mistake made when the team stopped trying to reach out to, Albany, upstate New York, Vermont, Ontario, Eastern Canada when they decided to be a more regional team. Do you think that?
I do think that started later in the club's history when they decided to, from an attendance standpoint, concentrate on the greater Montreal area, and they forgot about the Ottawa Valley and the Champlain Valley. Because back in the days when the team was drawing a lot of fans from the Plattsburgh, Burlington area and up in the Ottawa Valley area, they paid a lot of attention to those areas. They had ticket outlets there. They had charter buses coming to Jarry Park. You could go into the parking lot out at Jarry in the summertime and see license plates from Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont, New York, New Jersey, as well as Ontario and Quebec, of course. So the team was drawing from a wide area. Now, it's a given that Jarry Park only held 28,000, but nonetheless, on those beautiful summer days, it was that wide area from which the Expos drew fans that packed that ballpark. And I think when the team made the decision somewhere around the early 80s or mid-80s to concentrate on the greater Montreal area, I had a flashback to something that John McHale, the longtime president of the ball club, said way back in even the late 70s, before the team contended in '79, and they were struggling a little bit at the gate before the great halcyon days began in 1979, a team that won 95 games. And John McHale said, you know, Mayor Jean Drapeau selected that site for the Olympic Stadium in large part because there were 250,000 people within walking distance of the ballpark. And John said what Mayor Drapeau failed to recognize was it was 250,000 people that didn't care about baseball that lived within walking distance of the ballpark. So there were a myriad of problems. I won't repeat what Serge said, but I do think that the downward spiral of the Expos began actually when Charles Bronfman put the ball club up for sale. And I'll tell you why I believe that. Those of you who will check the history, and Serge knows this, I think everybody at this table knows this, when Charles put the club up for sale, there was a caveat. It must stay in Montreal. It was a Quebec team. It was a Montreal team. It was a Canadian team. He put it up for sale, and for 2 years, nobody in Quebec, nobody in the nation, from the East Coast to the West Coast, came in with the wherewithal and the interest to purchase the team and keep it in Montreal. After the failure to sell the club, and no one in Canadian business, Toronto, Maritimes, out west, nobody, coast to coast in Canada, stepped up to purchase the team. And that's when Charles put together Claude Brochu and a consortium of ownership, sold the club at a bargain basement price, took a huge loss himself just to keep it in Montreal. And I think when that happened, it touched off what was the beginning of the end. And we're looking back to the late 80s. So there was that time in the 90s, certainly 94 and 95, they had a chance to rescue the franchise. But I believe that the downward spiral began in the late 80s. One of the things that led to that was the fact that I don't have to tell you, enduring Montreal winters can be really tough, long, and hard. Nobody, sports fans or non-sports fans, wants to be inside in the summertime in Montreal. And that was another problem. To watch Major League Baseball, they had to give up that great outdoor weather and go inside to watch baseball. And that didn't work, obviously.
You know, if you look attendance-wise, the sort of spiral downward began when that roof was on permanently, almost that same time. Michael, you know, you were we want the players' perspective here. You know, obviously you saw the last three ownership groups, but you know, from the players, especially when you saw what happened in 02 and 03, the last great Expo teams that we saw in this city. You know, did the players, I mean, I know you love this city, but what was the feeling amongst the players as to Montreal and it being a major city?
Well, first of all, I mean, I appreciate you guys letting me come because to be with these guys again is awesome. And I have nowhere close the knowledge that these guys have to what it's like for baseball to be in Montreal. But I knew about the history and the pride that in my heart was to be a member of this organization. There was a lot of players that came through, and a lot of great players that were developed. And Montreal was known for developing players. And at that time, you know, Montreal, once they started doing fire sales, was known as basically a minor league team for other major league teams. You know, that was the sort of a joke. But I was drafted in '95. Real quick, let me just say this. I was drafted in '95, the year after the strike. And I knew how detrimental that was to the city. But it did lead to me getting drafted in the first round. And one of the things was, you know, I always felt like I was the product. I was part of the result of what happened that year. They had the best record. I was the last pick. I kind of felt like they got cheap and they got you know, basically not screwed, but they ended up with me when they could have had a World Series. They ended up with this first round pick, and I kind of wanted to change that a little bit, you know, and I really had a lot of pride, and like what I'm trying to say is that we had such a good team. I mean, you could go down the line. I mean, as far as our lineup and everything, and not even me, you know, I was just a small piece. But when you look at the talent we had, Justin, Vladimir Guerrero in those years. Now, granted, Guerrero replaced Larry Walker, who was an MVP type player at that time. So, you know, Vladimir at that point wasn't necessarily as great. So it wasn't, you weren't able to appreciate what you had. But in 02 and 03, our talent level started to come into fruition, and we were starting to develop. And the painful thing was to see that organization that I grew up with and all the guys that I played with just get kind of cherry-picked off the team. You know, we lost Javi Vasquez, Orlando Cabrera, Jose Vidro, Vladimir Guerrero, and even before that it was Rondell White. You know, so it was extremely difficult because it was kind of like it gave you that sense of it's only a matter of time before I'm going to be the next guy. You know, and it was painful in a way to play thinking about that, you know, and it was hard not to think about it as a player because it happened every year and it happened during the season. When Rondell White was traded in 2000, that absolutely crushed me as a player because Rondell was from the same state as I, and he at that point I think sort of revamped the organization in the sense that okay, now we had hope that because he was staying, that it would be another class of guys that were going to come up together. And then when he was traded, it was like, okay, here we go again. And so, like I said, and I hate to give a drawn-out answer because I'm very emotional about this, but I will say, especially in 02 and 03, when you look back on that team and when I look at my team picture, it is so frustrating to see the guys on the team and what we could have done if we'd have held on for just a couple more years. It's sad. I mean, it really is. It's top to bottom. I mean, you could go down the list of all the guys.
Elliott, I'm going to bring you into this. You know, the last Expos broadcast ever, one of the most emotional things up there with Jacques Doucette's final broadcast. Your final broadcast. You said something at the end of that broadcast. You said, why not just once? Words to that effect, 73, 79, 80, 81, 82. You listed off all the years that we had great teams. We never won a championship in this city. Why? You know, we talk about 94, we talk 02, 03, we had great teams those years as well. But throughout the 36-year history, we never won. Why was that?
Bad luck. I mean, come on, the Expos in all of those years, there's absolutely no reason why the Expos couldn't have won one of them. It's the luck of the draw. It's also the way that baseball was made up previously compared to now. If there had been a wild card, Expos would have been in the playoffs. This town, because of hockey, is so used to playoffs. In baseball, you had to finish first. In hockey, you could finish fourth and win a Stanley Cup. It just didn't work that way in baseball. You had your heart torn out of your chest because the team made it to the last day of the season in '79. They made it to the last day of the season in 1980. They got knocked out in the playoffs, one inning away from the World Series in 1981. Even after the players were taken away from them, this team competed. And Michael's talking about the players that were taken away from them in years that if they'd have stayed together, they might have had opportunities. And I'd love to be able to put the blame on this team leaving in one area, but it just doesn't work that way. The fans of Montreal, you can blame ownership and you can blame Major League Baseball and you can blame, but the fans in Montreal have to take some responsibility in this. There were days when Michael Barrett was a Montreal Expo and they had dollar for dollar, the best entertainment value in the city of Montreal was going out to watch Vladimir Guerrero. And they didn't come and watch him. Why? Because they'd given up already? I know we had that series where the Expos were back in it in 2003, and everybody was coming out for that series against the Philadelphia Phillies, and it was like, that was the last gasp, right? Yeah. Baseball had given up on the Expos. They hadn't given up on themselves, but to that point, the fans had given up on the Montreal Expos. If they hadn't, who knows? Maybe there would have been enough dollars to keep Rondell White. So I would put more blame in other areas, but the fans in Montreal also have to take some of this responsibility. Because there was a time after 1994, the year which killed the Expos, 1994, 1995 spring training, and as Serge said, they got rid of those 4 players. But in 1996, the Expos went to the second to last day of the season. Where was everybody? It was time to turn the page at it, a championship caliber team to go out and see, and you didn't go see them. So there's enough blame to go around, and we've taken so many calls over the years ad nauseum of pointing blame, of which the fans in Montreal never took it upon themselves to blame themselves even a little bit for something that was partly their fault. Part of the problem was money, and money was people going to the games and supporting this team, which turned out to be a good team after those players left. They had opportunities in '96, they had opportunities in 2003. They couldn't afford, Major League Baseball wouldn't allow them to bring up a player at the end of 2003 because of the situation they'd gotten themselves into. Maybe if along the way fans had given the product that deserved more attention, maybe there would have been more money to retain those players.
Yeah, Dave.
I just wanted to throw this in. I agree with you, what you said about the fans, but also there is this. I remember years ago asking John McHale what it took to support a successful major league franchise. And he pointed out 5 things. But the first 2 things were, he said, you need local and regional government support. Secondly, you need local, regional, and national commercial support. He started there with the basis and the foundation of a successful franchise. Fan support, of course, came along the way, as did a successful radio and television package to market the team, also a part of it. But what had happened at the same time period and same time frame that Elliott was referring to was a total loss of corporate support, not only throughout Canada, where they put all of their money into the Blue Jays telecast, the Blue Jays networks, the Blue Jays corporate sponsorships and partners. It was a Quebec thing, that Montreal Expos franchise, and national advertisers stayed away from supporting the Montreal Expos, as did local advertisers. Elliott and I can both remember watching the income from radio and television broadcasts go down and down and down and down during those years, to where all of a sudden, at the turn of the decade, in 2000, they couldn't get 1 penny for the radio broadcast rights in Montreal.
Okay, the Expos, I would say, in the early 1990s were 6th in Major League Baseball in bringing in money from their radio and television broadcasters. Dave, how much of this blame goes on Major League Baseball? The biggest thing that changed as far as money coming in from corporate sponsorship and broadcasting is when Major League Baseball made the decision in favor of the Toronto Blue Jays to limit the Montreal Expos to 40 games on television per season that went into the lucrative markets where the money was coming from. You couldn't broadcast Expos game into Southern Ontario. And so this is a very small country as far as population is concerned. If you take that chunk of population that you can no longer broadcast to, then the sponsors went, you know what? We can't reach the largest, richest part of our country. Why should we bother putting money in?
It was a huge mistake by Major League Baseball, and it was inaugurated by one of the biggest mistakes that John McHale made in his long tenure as president when he signed off on the territorial rights issue when the Blue Jays came into the league. When the Expos were in business by themselves in Canada, their games were seen on the CBC coast to coast in Canada. The radio network through the mid-'70s into the late '70s stretched 50-some stations from coast to coast, from the Maritimes to the Pacific Northwest. When the Blue Jays came in, Montreal's hierarchy signed off on a deal that gave the Blue Jays all of southern Ontario, kicked the Expos broadcasts out of the nation's capital, out of Ottawa, took them out of even places like Oshawa, Ontario, and said, Belleville is the point. You can have Belleville, but nothing west of Belleville. And so the total structure of their radio and television package collapsed with the signing of that agreement. When the Expos realized the error of their ways and went back to Major League Baseball, they got no backing, none whatsoever.
Okay.
So it was a shared responsibility of the Expos leadership at that time and Major League Baseball that allowed that to collapse.
Okay, just a couple of notes. First of all, I remember when I first joined Dave doing on the baseball broadcast, we had 41 stations outside of Montreal. When we finished, of course, we had none. But I believe that the misconception with how we're looked at in broadcasting our sports in Canada is down to the fact that if you look in the States, how their television broadcasts are doled out, it's regional. It's all regional. It's Florida, it's Ohio, and they have Cleveland and Cincinnati. It's New York, and they have the Sabres and the Rangers and the Islanders in hockey. And we're national. And that's a big problem because we don't have a Fox Sports Montreal. You know, we don't have a Fox Sports Quebec. We just don't have that. And so to be able to operate with the dollars that are coming in, you need to be national. And they cut the national out of the Montreal Expos with that decision.
Serge, you were nodding your head there, so.
Pardon me?
You were nodding your head and saying.
No, that's a great point. No, that's a great point. Well, like I said, there's so many factors who hurt that team. I mean, name it. Radio, TV, fans, management. I still believe management made some great mistake. That was one. Like you said about McHale, that was a big no. But I mean,
He was pointing at me.
like I said, how many blows can you take?
Michael?
Just too many.
I just had a thought. I don't know if you guys, which thought is scary that I'd have. There's in Chicago, the Blackhawks, which was a dead organization.
Yes.
They go out and hire a guy like John McDonough, a guy that was with the Cubs, an experienced guy, to come in and revamp the market. I'm wondering, and you guys know better than me.
That was a franchise who was dying.
Yeah, it was dying, and now they're
They got to live
packed
because their
everything.
owner died there.
But on a serious note, there was not a I don't know, Dave, you guys help me out here because you guys know better than me, but I didn't ever feel like, until Loria, in a sense, Loria actually, when he first came in, tried to market the players. That was was a tactic of his, because in the time from '95 till Loria came in, that was a dead era for us being marketed as players. We couldn't get, and maybe that was because of the economic difficulty that Montreal was going through. I don't know, but I just know that my wife and I would always go to other cities, and the players, and I'm not saying I should have been on the billboard or anything, but Vladimir for sure. Vladimir was the type of player that everywhere you went should have been, seen. I mean,
Yeah, there was no marketing whatsoever for the player. That's
yeah,
what I remember.
I mean, you go to Cleveland and you see a young player. When Vladimir was coming up, he was the LeBron James of baseball, and there was nothing out there of the guy, and I think that's where, in a lot of ways, management, which we go back to management, failed, and. So I don't know how you guys feel about that. But.
Michael, you're right, and we all remember that in the 80s and into the early 90s, the Expos management team and their marketing team and merchandising team spent more time and more money promoting Yuppie than any single player.
Stop laughing, it's not funny.
And I'm not anti-UP, but, you know, I don't want to get the UP fans upset with me over this,
But you're right, because at one point, UP was more popular than most of the players.
because that's who they marketed, that's who they sent out, that's who you saw on billboards. He was the corporate face for about a 15-year period, I would say. He was the corporate face of the Expos.
It's funny, Dave, you look in the last couple of years in the Montreal Expos clubhouse, and there's team pictures all the way along the wall. And it's remarkable as you go along the pictures to see where it is that UP actually appears in the team picture.
Yeah.
And
That's
how
the only
things
one
changed
they
at
didn't
that
trade.
point. That's right. And you can't miss him, eh? It's the only big and orange thing in the picture.
Michael, did the Expos management fail the players? I mean, you're one of the few Expo players, you know, that I can remember who has a love for Montreal. Now, do you think management just didn't even sell the city to the players?
I look at pretty much every problem that the organization had as a double-edged sword, okay? You have to credit management with the success of bringing the talent in. So we have to be fair in that regard, okay? And I think also from a marketing standpoint, the Expos after a while couldn't afford to market the players because of the infrastructure of the financial situation. I don't even know what I just said. It kind of just came out.
It's that base academy
It
education.
is. It's just
Yep.
overflowing now. But what I'm trying to say is, one of the thoughts that I had is that the organization could not afford to market players. They didn't have the money, number one. And number two, they didn't want to market players because they wanted to keep the players. You know, the more they market a player, the more valuable they become. Now the organization can't afford to keep them. And they did everything that they could to just hold on to what little they had. And in a way, so what I'm trying to say is management was really good in a lot of ways because they brought in some amazing talent. And if you look at the tactics that they had to maintain their players, was really, really clever. In the long run, it ended up coming back and biting them in the rear. Because, like, you look at the Cleveland Indians organization in the past, before the 90s, before they started to rebuild, and one of the things that they did is they started to get these Jim Thomes and they started to get these Manny Ramirez as ownership came in, and they started buying these guys at an early age. They got Jim Thome for like $9 million for 3 years. You know, there was moves made that saved their organization. And then they built the ballpark, and those players became a part of that. It's like Dave said, you know, the outdoor, and Serge and Elliott, they would all agree, the outdoor stadium would have saved Montreal. Not only because what that would have done was, okay, this is what was the all-in result, and forgive me if you guys correct me, because I'm probably wrong. But had they, just like Cleveland, they locked the players up in long-term contracts early, and foreseeing that they got a new stadium, they had these lower contracts, that the new stadium, new attendance would pay for the contracts. Now all of a sudden they would be able to turn profit in the long run.
But at what point, early is a big word, because at what point would the new stadium have saved the Montreal Expos? If it was announced before the Expos were officially sold to Washington, that they were getting a new downtown stadium in 2000, that they were going to continue to play in Olympic Stadium after 2004, and that they build a new ballpark and it'd be ready in 2006, that the Expos would have, that would have saved the Expos? I don't think so. I think that
The new stadium,
if
if the new stadium was built, and I'm saying, Elliott, and I'm not arguing with you.
No, I'm just saying, at what point?
I would like to
Be
think of
our
this-
guest.
I would like to think of this as a debate, but, you know, what I'm trying to say is, okay, the timing would have been the late 80s, the 90s. Okay, let's lock up a Larry Walker 4 or 5 year deal. The mistake is that, in my opinion, it was hard to predict the strike. I mean, let's face it.
Losing all season, yeah.
That really hurt the Expos, of course. But if you look at the players that we lost going into that next year, those are players that should have been locked up for multi-year deals. Larry Walker should not have been able to walk until his 7th or 8th year. a Marquise Grissom. No way. He was a homegrown player. Same with Larry Walker. But those are the guys you don't want to leave. Those are the franchise players. If I were general manager of a team, I want the guys. It's just like, I don't know if you guys follow NFL, but one of the great things that the Atlanta Falcons did in our era is they locked Matt Ryan up. They're going to build this team around a guy that's going to be in the organization for 10 years. That's where the Expos slipped and fell, in my opinion. Get those guys, have them be a part of this organization for more than 10 years. Once you start getting a 10 years, now a sense of pride starts to take over. Now you start appreciating what you have. Now you start to dive into more history of where you're coming from. That to me is what was lost.
And I still believe that a downtown ballpark would have probably saved the franchise. Maybe I'm dreaming. It's not the first time I'm dreaming, but I mean, the thing what amazed me the most is the Expos last 36 years in Montreal. The fans here never had the chance to sit in a real ballpark.
They built an Olympic Stadium.
Which is quite of an experience, I mean, because I've been to Boston and all those places. It's so much fun. It's so much different. The Jerry Park was an accident. They were looking for a place desperately, to put for the team. And the Big O was okay, but it wasn't a real ballpark. And I remember going to the watching the fans, they would show up for game times. When you have a real ballpark, people show up 2 hours before the game because it's fun to be around. You talk to people, you have a beer. It's a completely different atmosphere, which we never had in Montreal. Maybe a little bit at Jerry Park, but not at the Big O for sure. It was cold there. It was not fun to get there. But I still believe that if the people will have loved that atmosphere, they would have enjoyed themselves a lot more than going to the Big O. Anyway.
And that first point that Dave brought up that John McHale said, government support. We'll touch on that. I did read Claude Brochu's book, and he pretty much says,
Yeah,
Lucien
but he was
Bouchard
right about
said
that.
no in '98, and that was it.
Yeah.
Right? If the government says yes in
Yeah.
'98, it's a different story. I mean, the deal was done. From what I understand, the deal was done with Bernard
With the
Laundrie.
government, yeah, Bernard
They
Laundrie.
went to the premier, and it was a done deal.
Yeah.
And I mean, do you feel that that's
It
that's
didn't help for
the
sure.
last nail in the coffin?
That didn't help. Yeah, it was. Yeah, don't forget at the time, Brochu, who made some mistake, no doubt about it. At one point, was it 2001 or whatever? Well, just before that, he said, "The Big O is not the right place for baseball." I mean, it was like a guy who owned a nice restaurant, and the guy is saying to his customers, "This is not a good place to have a restaurant." I mean, seriously, that didn't help either.
No, you're right, but there was a method to his madness when he said that.
Yeah, I know.
Because it was the Brochu group that tried to put together, remember when they took out the option, the sale option on the piece of land just down below the arena? And they had taken that out, and they were putting together this package to go out and sell a downtown 38 to 42,000 seat retractable roof ballpark facility. So Claude's first step in that direction was to point out the obvious: this Big O is not a good place for baseball. But it was predicated on the fact that he was then going out to sell the new downtown ballpark. And I think that the Expos needed that perhaps the Premier was right when he said Montreal did not need the Expos. But the Expos needed Montreal, the energy, the vibrancy of this city, the downtown life. I don't have to tell you about it. Walking downtown in the summertime here is an experience, especially at lunchtime. And it is just marvelous. There's this energy, and people want to be outside, and they want to enjoy their city. And every park and every step in front of every office building, they're all crammed with people that want to be outside. And they recognize that. The Montreal ownership group at that time recognized that they needed to get the fans outside if they were to succeed. And I think that's what predicated Claude saying,
and don't forget,
Olympic Stadium's got to go.
The internal fight between the group, that didn't help.
Terrible.
I mean, to me was Brochu against Jacques Ménard,
Boyd-
Yes.
whatever. That hurt.
If
Because
part
I
of the
thought
proposal-
that was an all-star team there. But as far as businessmen are
Right.
concerned, we had an all-star team. And then the shit happened, sorry, but that's,
Serge, if a good portion of the proposal was in taking what government made off of taxes from the ball players' salaries.
yeah.
Okay, to sell the ballpark, to build the ballpark.
I thought it was a
which
pretty
means
good
it was a
idea.
no-brainer. Okay, we heard lots of, well, we don't want to build the ballpark because we need to build hospitals, but this was money that would not be coming in otherwise.
Yeah.
This was money that was only going to be coming in. So did they get turned down because they didn't like Claude Brochu?
No, I
So was
think.
he the wrong point man? I mean, we're talking about strictly from a financial decision. A good portion of the money that would be paying for the ballpark would be coming off ball players, the taxes off ball players' salaries. It was a no-brainer, because it was money that otherwise would not, if the Expos left town, the government would not be seeing that money anymore.
No, you
So how
got a
does that
point. No, but like I said, they were fighting each other before they met with the government, and the government knew about it. There was already, the group was divided already. You had Jacques Ménard on one side, and they were shooting at each other, and I think when the government saw that, he didn't believe it very much in that project. He had his doubt, and maybe with good reason.
Michael, I think you had something you wanted to add there.
Well, actually, Dave, I don't know, Dave, you look like you had something you wanted to say.
Oh, I'm good.
We're gonna get to questions.
I just want to say, okay, we're talking about the, hold on. I just want to say real quick, you asked me, I did want to say that, we're talking about the economics of the city and everything, okay? And I hate to refer back to the NFL, but let's talk about revenue sharing, okay? And what that's done for the NFL. I think also that, and I probably don't need to get into it too much because I'm still part of the union, the Players Association, which I'm very for. But at the same time, I don't think that there was a really strong effort to increase revenue sharing, which in the NFL saved a lot of teams, okay?
Still.
Still.
Yeah.
Now you got the Pittsburgh Steelers winning Super Bowls. You walk into Pittsburgh, that is a great city for sports, but during that time before the Steelers started to win again, before revenue sharing, attendance had died, just like the Pirates. You go into Pittsburgh Pirates Stadium, a place of great history, the Willie Stargell area, the Roberto Clemente, the players that they brought up in that organization, and now, because they have no revenue sharing, or there is some little, which is, I think, can
Better than
be
nothing, yeah.
deceiving, but not enough to rebuild a franchise.
Yeah, and that was brought up earlier this morning. That's 16
So,
years. they
I
haven't
mean,
won.
I don't know enough about, these guys know more than me. I'm just bringing up a topic that I think could have been crucial. Like I said, I'm a player.
We've talked a lot about the problems, and we spent a lot of time on that. Let's turn it to something maybe a little more positive. Bring up that slide. Here's the Facebook and Twitter pages for the Expos. There are 30,000 Expo fans on Facebook, a couple of thousand Twitter fans on the Twitter, okay? Merchandise has gone through the roof, actually, this year. Nike and Majestic and New Era are making tons of Expos gear that's being sold like crazy. I mean, you see interviews with that have been in various papers. The Expos logo is now hip again. I mean, there has been a certain resurgence of people who are either nostalgic or they want this team back, or people who it's been 5 years. Why do you think we're seeing? I mean, you go to the Washington National pages. It's not even close to the numbers that you see on the Expos. I mean, and that's a team that's playing right now.
No, the Expos
So-
had much fewer losses than them this year.
That's right. But, I mean, why do you think people are so, enthusiastic? This is the biggest crowd we've ever had here for this event, and I think a lot of it has to do with people coming here for the Expos. Why do you think we're seeing so much interest now, 5 years later?
I don't have an answer to that, but I did read one story that the hip-hop community is taking credit for that. I saw that online.
Dave
That
reads
the Montreal hip-hop community is taking credit for bringing back the logo and the Expos wear. And young people are seeing that if it's cool for those guys, am I right on that? The young people are seeing that if it's cool for the rappers and those involved in hip-hop and that whole music world, if it's cool to them to show that Expos logo and those Expos colors and replicas of the old Expos uniforms, that powder blue color and all of those other things that we're starting to see again, that maybe it's right. Maybe they did lead the way.
Serge, on roofredneck.com, there's a great thing that has been running all season, a look back at the 1969 season. I mean, if any of you haven't seen it, it's amazing. It looks back week by week of the entire season. You know, what do you think people here in Montreal are longing to get the Expos back? What's your sense? I mean, when you talk to people about the Expos, it seems to me everyone I talk to looks back at it fondly and gets a smile on their face.
Every week, I run into people who ask me again about the Expos, you know, which is quite amazing 5 years later, in the subway, whatever. I'm not saying 1,000 people that don't, just once in a while, you know, but every week there's people who ask me about the Expos. Or, you know, even they're still talking about Jerry Park, which is unbelievable. Jerry Park is, you know, it's dead. They're still talking about it, how much they had fun to go there. They don't talk about the Big O, but they talk about the good years and Jerry Park. But I'm telling you, I go a restaurant and the guy will say, will tell me how much he missed the Expos.
Michael, we know you miss Montreal. Do you get that sentiment when you talk to players?
No, I mean, you know, my wife and I were talking about this just a couple days ago. I mean, the young players coming up in this day are completely different.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that my class was different, and it was kind of heading in a different direction than, you know, obviously I think it's the structure of salaries. You know, players that are just now stepping into the major leagues are making $400,000, which is a lot of money. And when I was stepping in, it was $100,000, which was a lot of money then. So players' appreciation for the past kind of died too, you know. And you know, Stephanie and I were talking about, my wife, and we were just saying, you know, it's unfortunate because, you know, especially like when I was in Montreal, I mean, there was a wealth of history, there was a wealth of camaraderie among us that I don't think a lot of the players really appreciated until we split up and got in the other organizations to know what it was about. You know, and when we see each other, you know, it's a fun relationship that we got to be a part of something special that we didn't appreciate at the time. So no, I don't think people really truly understand this day and age what it was like to be an Expo, or, you know, you look across the field and, you know, there was a while, you know, I was telling somebody this the other day that when we went into town, maybe because I'm from Atlanta, we used to play the Braves, and they were scared to death of us. They were so scared of the Montreal Expos, the Braves. During their run, their run of 12 years to the playoffs,
Yeah.
there was only one team they were scared of, and that was the Expos. There was a time when teams used to look across the field and know that they had it coming. We might have lost a lot of games, but for a while there, they didn't know what was about to hit them. We were unpredictable, you know, in a bad way more than a good way. But you know, what I'm saying is that when Felipe was there was a level of baseball that we played, even when we weren't that good, that scared the heck out of people. You know, and it's different everywhere else you go. You know, you see guys from other teams going up and giving hugs to the other players, you know, like, how are you doing, you know, and it's kind of like that's not the way it was when Felipe, I remember when Brad Fulmer got traded to the Blue Jays, and this was in 2000, and I was over there talking to Brad Fulmer, and Felipe pulled me inside and said, "Don't ever let me see you do that again." He was talking about not so much talking to Brad Fulmer, but talking to another player on another team. You see what I'm saying? That's lost also. So in a way, nobody really understands what it meant to look at somebody across the field as an Expo, much less appreciate it.
I think that your union has gone a long way to foster that feeling of comradeship among all players. We see it. I think it started in the 80s we see players go out that are in the starting lineup to run from foul line to center field. Now we see both teams go out there and they stop out there for the 5-minute union meeting. And all the players are getting together, everybody's high-fiving and giving hugs, and then they continue their running. When I broke into the National League and the Expos came into the National League in 1969, there was one umpire from the umpire's crew that had to go to the ballpark early before the other 3 members of the crew went and sit in the stands during batting practice and from the time the home team went out on the field to prevent that from happening. If he saw a member of the Expos talking to a member of the Cardinals, the umpire would stand up and yell at them and get them away from one another. This took place in every single ballpark. But as the union got stronger and stronger and stronger, and there was this feeling of comradeship amongst all the players, we started to see that come to an end. There are legendary stories told about the likes of Hall of Famers like Bob Gibson, who would not speak to a member of another team, didn't talk to, recognize, or even make eye contact unless that player wore the Cardinal uniform. Those days are gone. The game has changed. It's not like that
Did you
anymore.
watch the last game of the World Series?
Yes,
Just before the game, Pedro giving a high five to Aaron.
yes.
Before the game.
You would never have seen that back in the day, as they say. And I'm all for change. I mean, I'm not an old fuddy-duddy when it comes to changes in baseball. I'm really not. But I am a traditionalist, and I do believe not just in baseball, but in all other sports, that we see too much of that nowadays. And I think, especially once fans are in the ballpark, I think fans like to see that there's a competitive feeling going on down on the field and not this feeling of oneness, of togetherness, and we're all buddy-buddy, okay, now start the game. And I don't think fans want to see that. I think fans like to see within reason a guy taken into the boards hard, you know.
All right, so let's get some questions. If anyone has a question, yeah, okay.
Yeah, a question about Michael. Since you played both in Montreal and Toronto and U.S. Marlins, how would you compare the baseball atmosphere in the 2 different markets? And like say this year, Toronto suffered a decline in attendance as the season went on. Do you see the same type of frustration among the Toronto fans that we had here in Montreal regarding the product on the field? How would you address that as a player?
Forgive me for my lack of knowledge, but one of the interesting things that I noticed about Toronto this year that I had never noticed before was we talked about the regional support. Okay, so in Toronto, you go north of there, forgive me, I can't remember the name of the town. Like you go up north, there's like a large population, and that would be a big enough city to have another major league team. So what I think is beginning to happen is almost a separation from Toronto. It's a movement. You know, there was a movement in Montreal. There was a movement in Toronto to have a new team in Toronto over Montreal. You see what I'm saying? So I think that Toronto Blue Jays, in a lot of ways, is old news there. You know, and it's going to take somebody to come in there, other than the people at Rogers Sportsnet, to market that team. You know, I don't know, but I just felt like when I was there that there wasn't a connection with the fans. And there are a lot of great Blue Jays fans there as well as there were Montreal fans. But what I saw happen was the lackluster that shocked me. Because I remember, 8 years ago when we played them, 50,000 a night right after the World Series, they're starting to, if they're not careful, they're going in the same direction the Expos were. And the reason why I say that is, in a way, it wasn't any different, unfortunately. And I don't think it had anything to do with Canadians or the baseball fans in the area, because they were there. They were out there. There was just a lack of, local marketing, which, like I said, I think that the organization should be responsible for some of that, not all of it, but they're not really gravitating toward baseball there right now. And if they're not careful, they're going to have a similar situation.
Sir,
Do you think it's a product of the on-field record, or just the natural marketing of the team itself?
I think the stadiums has gotten a little bit older. I think that in the future, and hopefully not the, hopefully in the near future, there will be a new stadium there. It's the same thing that happened in Montreal. It's a retractable stadium, but it doesn't have the life or the vibrance of some of the newer stadiums out there. You look at Minnesota and everybody says they're crazy for an outdoor stadium. And that's what people were saying about Montreal, but it's the same thing. It's the winters. I mean, it's the summers that nobody wants to go indoors, and to me, Toronto is very close to needing a new stadium.
Yeah.
Just two little points. Number one is sometime this summer I put on my Facebook page, Washington Nationals, .299. Couldn't happen to a nicer bunch of guys. I got the most hits on my status than I've ever had before. But my question is actually to Serge. You mentioned, or I believe it was Michael, I mentioned something about the marketing. I believe I read or heard somewhere about the time that the Alouettes actually offered to give a hand to the Montreal Expos in marketing and were turned down. Laurie and Sampson basically told Went Hall to take a hike.
Maybe, I'm not sure though. But I think I heard that before, but I'm not sure. But I wouldn't be shocked.
Serge, when we talked on the phone when I asked you to do this, we had a conversation. One of the funnier comments, because every comment you say is funny. But you said something about, you were talking about Montreal because the theme today is Montreal Major League City, and you said the best team in Montreal is the Canadiens marketing squad.
No doubt about it. They did a tremendous job. The Canadiens have been so-so for the last few years. I cannot believe the way the fans react to this team. I remember when the Canadiens had great teams, they were not that popular than they are now. I mean, it's unbelievable. That's the marketing team of the Canadiens, to me, is by far the best team in Montreal. And they got a new generation, too, to the Bell Center. You go there now, you see young kids, 5, 6 years old, more than ever. And not only that, everybody is wearing le chandail du Canadien. Everybody. And I remember 10 years ago, 12 years ago, I used to go there. People were wearing the Ducks, Anaheim Ducks uniform, or Pittsburgh, whatever. I said, what the, I mean, seriously, I was shocked, and because I was telling myself, this is the biggest hockey organization in the world. You go there, and you see fans wearing the Anaheim Ducks jersey. Doesn't make any sense. Now you go there, and everybody, I would say 99% of the fans, or close to, are wearing the Canadian jersey, which is amazing.
That's a great point about the marketing because listening to Dave talking about when the Expos were up for sale, and you couldn't get anybody here to nobody local, nobody regional, nobody provincial.
Yeah.
Montreal Canadiens were the same thing.
Yep.
The Montreal Canadiens couldn't
Yep.
be sold local. They couldn't be sold regional. They couldn't be sold national.
Yeah.
They were sold American.
Yeah,
And those are the people that made them viable again.
yeah.
So it was the same situation. Even the Canadians couldn't. It's a lack of vision in the way that we look at sports. I don't know if things have changed because of the way they turned around the
Yeah.
brand that is the Montreal Canadiens.
They've been amazing because they've been able to sell a so-so team to the fans. It's easy to sell a winning team. I mean, but this team has been, so, yeah, and I'm very polite. And you look at the fans, it's unbelievable what they did.
Beatrice?
Do you think that maybe the Montreal Canadiens could help bringing back the Expos with the centennial? There's been so much marketing around that, the nostalgia of the great players. They built everything on the history of the club. If there is a large enough movement on this idea of the history of sports, would that eventually bring back the Expos?
Unless the Molsons are willing to dish out another $500 million, we're talking about buying a club and building a stadium. That's like $1 billion. It's a lot.
And I think in general, anywhere in North America, you're not going to find one franchise, in this case a hockey franchise, trying to support the NFL or the Major League Baseball franchise. That's not going to happen. Dollars are too hard to come by. And the Montreal Canadiens need all the corporate dollars that they can get, all the corporate participation and partners that they can acquire to sustain their level of play and entertainment and their corporation as we know it today. And they don't have enough left over to go out. It's a highly competitive business, and it's not just in Montreal that you wouldn't find that cooperative effort. It's everywhere because business is tough.
Yeah, the Canadians like their monopoly, I suppose.
But wait, real quick. I think, well, no, I got a great point, though. You have to understand that there was an effort by the Expos to build that relationship when we put Rocket's number on our jersey. We're the only baseball team to ever, pay tribute to a hockey player. And that was Loria that was trying to build that relationship, and it went nowhere. We had a question up there, yeah?
You mentioned how 2000, you said you were disappointed by, they were getting rid of Rondo White and company, and I just want to know, in 2002, they made a trade for Bartolo Colon, and did you feel like that was a trade, did you get the sense that they were trying to win, or was that just a random trade for you guys?
I was excited about that trade because I got the opportunity to be a part of history. Bartolo that year was the go 10-10 in American League, National League, the second time only. That's been the worst trade in baseball. I mean, we all know Cliff Lee, Grady Sizemore, Brandon Phillips. Sorry about those three names, two potential Hall of Famers right there. Bartolo Colon was a great addition. I don't know. I really don't know what to say about that trade, but I will tell you that I think there was Omar coming in and trying to make a huge statement about how Omar has arrived as the general manager. And I'm going to change the way things are. I'm going to make the Expos what they've always should have been, and that was just short-sighting. It was quick fix. Anyone that was with long-term knowledge that had the Expos at heart, best interests at heart, would have never made that trade. And he actually traded him to Tony LaCava, who's now the Blue Jays' assistant general manager, was our minor league head of our minor league development. Why would you want to make a trade to that guy? Why would you want to trade our players to the guy that he knew everything about him? I don't know. It was crazy.
Blue shirt in the last row.
Okay, Michael, you talked about locking up players and that they should have locked up Larry Walker before and whoever else. I'll give you an example. For New York Knicks, even though they're a bigger market, they locked up Patrick Ewing, was successful for them. However, they did lock up Stephon Marbury, and after that, the team went in decline. Do you feel that the management was scared that if they locked up a big player, and since we're not a big market, if they failed, then it would have been more of a loss of money and
I appreciate you asking me. I think these guys would have I think they would have a better answer for it. I would just say that to me, it never hurts, because in baseball they're guaranteed contracts. In the NFL, I don't know how the NBA is structured, but NFL they're not guaranteed contracts. So if you were to lock up a player, and like a Michael Vick in Atlanta, and I'd hate to go back to, that's my local news, but he was let go. His $70 million contract was voided. In baseball, that's not going to happen. And so annually, the union has put into place so many rules and legislation that would hardly allow a player to go in the tank and still not get paid. So in a way, I think it makes more of a statement to make that move than the actual cost of doing it, because like I said, players still will find a way to get a guaranteed contract in baseball. They still will find a way.
Question up there? Well, let's do one, okay?
So, Michael, 2002, you guys had Cliff Floyd, Bartolo Colon. Prior to that point, you're leading the wild card right at them. You get two great players, nothing happened. Why?
Good luck.
I'm like the dumbest one in here, and I'm getting all the questions. That is a great strategy for journalists. You know, when you start, go after the dumbest guy in a group. Easy target. We'll give you all the dumb answers, and you can just hammer us later. These guys are laughing because I was the biggest target. They interviewed me all the time. No, I am going to say something that I'm going to regret here in an hour, but that's okay. I'm cool with that. I don't know, man. That was some confusing times, man.
Honesty, we want the honesty.
I'm always good with that. That's one thing you will not have a problem with me. The whole Cliff Floyd trade, that really confused me. Number one, it looked like we were making a movement there. We got Bartolo, we got Cliff Floyd, and it looked like, okay, look, I was excited. Then a week later, we traded Cliff Floyd, and we got two young pitchers that weren't ready for the big leagues. That one blew my mind, okay? And when I saw that happen, and there were other couple of things that happened in the clubhouse that I think there were some issues with Tony Armas Jr., there was issues with Omar Minaya, Frank Robinson, and then when the trade unfolded with Cliff Floyd and he ended up leaving us, that was like, okay, everybody in front office is just giving up, and we still have a chance. I couldn't figure that out.
Michael, the 02, the 03 teams, we have a question coming up from Twitter. Those two teams, last great Expo teams, did they win in spite of Frank Robinson or thanks to Frank Robinson? I know it's a loaded question, and I want to hear from Serge and Elliott as well on that one. I know it's a loaded question, but it's one that a lot of people have asked.
Frank made a great impact in my life, okay? Number one, he was a guy that played with a huge chip on his shoulder. And then, in my opinion, that chip grew over time. He managed with one. Early on, we wouldn't have ever come close to winning without Frank, early on. Then, down the road, something happened where egos got in the way. I don't know if Frank started it. I don't know if he tried to end it. But there was definitely some issues there that took place. And like I said, and I'm sure these guys know, that once that happened, you can't have problems at the top and not feel it as a player. It's a domino effect in more ways than one. Whether whether you know it or not, you still feel it. And like I said, once there started being some problems in front office and stuff, then slowly over time, do I blame Frank Robinson? I don't know who to blame. But I will tell you that if you're not the solution, you're part of the problem, or whatever, you're the problem, right?
Serge, I mean, you watched that team.
Well, the first year, I think Frank enjoyed managing the team. I really think that he thought it was a one-year deal, and then it lasts, 3 years? It was too much for him. He had enough after the first year. The second year, I don't know. I don't think he was in it like he was in the first year. I don't think he was very enthusiastic about it after the first year.
Jeez. I know that from conversations with different players that there were several, if not many, that had problems with Frank Robinson as their manager. I don't know if that affected them in the way they played on the field. There were times, it's so easy to pick out individual instances of managers and saying, what the hell are you doing? But the fact of the matter is that I don't think it matters who the manager is and who you are. There are many times over a season where you're going to think over to yourself, and then the managers have their own ideas of how they're going to run things. What the hell are you doing? I've often said that if I was the manager and I was also criticizing myself, I'd say, what the hell are you doing? It's just, I don't know that anyone could have made a winner of those teams instead of Frank Robinson, but I do know that there were problems between some players and the manager.
We have a question from Twitter, Thomas?
Yeah, comments first. Certainly the biggest tweets as of yet, the quote that has come up the most, not only retweeted here, but retweeted elsewhere from users that aren't even here, is when Dave said the Expos have spent more marketing UP than any one of its players. This is number one. But the question for the panel, this is from user Jen No Jack Todd said that the Expos would have done better had the big open downtown. Your thoughts on that?
We'll start with Dave.
Well, I think the Expos would have done better right from the start had they been downtown. Had the original baseball plan panned out, they would have been in Jerry Park for 2 years while the stadium was being built, a downtown stadium. And I don't know at the time, until Mayor Drapeau made the bid for the Olympics and they came up with the grand idea of the Olympic Stadium, I don't know whether or not they originally thought of a retractable roof. But if they'd have been at Jerry Park for 2 years and then moved to a downtown, a good, vibrant downtown location, they had a chance very early on to stabilize the franchise. Going into the mid-'70s, while we waited for the farm system, which was the talk of baseball, by the way, to produce to the major league level, there were some shaky years in there where the team wasn't very good on the field, and other than the great, beautiful weekend days at Jerry Park, the team wasn't drawing all that well for some of those seasons in the mid-'70s. But as soon as that farm system produced and then took off, and then that coincided with the move just a few years later into Olympic Stadium. So there was a combination of things there. I go back to what Elliott said before. This franchise, almost from the start, ran into a lot of bad luck, almost on a not a year-to-year basis, but in 5 or 10 year segments. They ran into some very bad luck situations.
We have a question there. Yeah.
Going back to what you said about how the Montreal Canadiens, the best team in Montreal is marketing. Do you think the fall of the Expos gave kind of like an open space for the Montreal Canadiens marketing team to come in and take whatever? Because I mean, it did leave a big gap right in Montreal, because there's sports fans who don't have baseball to follow anymore. So
I think it's turned into a year-round cycle, right?
Yeah, because Montreal Canadiens are the only major league team we got now. I mean, obviously it did help.
Yeah.
And they really took advantage of it.
Yeah, and
I
they
mean,
took UP too.
they really they did a great job.
One last question over here.
Seeing as how the theme for today is Montreal Majors City, would you say it's possible, or one of the possibilities of a AA team, let's say, coming here? Or AAA?
I don't see it. It seems to me that is the case, that Montreal is a major league city, and we don't seem to want to accept anything less than that. And that is part of the problem with Montreal Expos, that I think we no longer saw the Montreal Expos as major league because of the reasons that Michael outlined. That you know, they were a feeder system for the rest of baseball. That doesn't make you major league. I think a AA team would have a very difficult time to draw people here in Montreal.
Address that in 2 words, Montreal Juniors.
I think it would be a mistake to have a minor league team here.
Why?
Because if it didn't work out and there wasn't support, then that would make the city look even worse. So it's not a risk we're taking. And if you want baseball back in Montreal, you should eliminate that thought.
Does anybody, well, if we're going to finish this thing up, does anybody see that as a possibility that 5 years, 10 years, 20 years down the line that Montreal ever gets a baseball team again?
I think so.
Really?
I think it would have to be in a realignment. And the reason why I say that is that it would definitely help the Expos boost their attendance initially if they were to jump into the American League East. When we play, interleague was very good for Montreal. It was really good. We drew from Boston and New York, and that was huge. I mean, we played in front of some very fun fans to be around.
Yeah, but you know what part of what's killing the Toronto Blue Jays? And that's competing against the Red Sox and the Yankees, and they just, no matter how much money they pour into it, it appears, I would think, to Toronto Blue Jay fans that they're never going to be good enough to hold and catch
That's, you know what, it's just a timing. I mean, look what happened already, though. They won 2 World Series. They won back-to-back.
Yeah.
They still played the Yankees.
Those are the old days.
Doesn't matter.
All right.
They still, I mean, they still had to compete with a big-time owner. Steinbrenner, you know what I'm saying? I mean, why do you do this to me? Do you want to look smarter than me? Because that's not hard to do.
Well,
He's smarter than me, okay? Want to argue with him?
We have to wrap up. Let's end on a high note. I'll go down the panel. I'll start with Elliott. We'll go down the panel. What is the one highlight that you take away from Expos baseball?
Oh, goodness
I mean, that's
One
I
highlight.
know. But let's end on a positive
Goodness.
note.
One highlight.
Dave?
You know what? The highlight is, and the biggest disappointment is one and the same. Is that in the connection that I had with my dad when it came to baseball, and I believe that we are missing that. I cannot take my son to a baseball game here, to the point where I'm broadcasting a perfect game from Los Angeles. I'm talking to my dad, you know? He's the one who's listening to me. That doesn't exist anymore. That makes me sad.
Well, I've taken a lot away. A career I spent over half my adult life here in Montreal for 32 seasons broadcasting Expos baseball. And I have that place in my heart and in my mind that will never change, a love of this city, a love of the fans and the people of this city, and of the game itself doesn't change at all. I was as saddened as anyone to see the demise of the franchise. I was very fortunate to be able to continue my career elsewhere, but those 32 years were just wonderful years with great memories. I would like to replay the last 10 and change a few things, and I think we'd all be talking about a different theme and a different subject right now if we could have changed a few things the last 10 years of that franchise. But nonetheless, it was a great time, and I'm always asked, can you pick out any one thing? No, it's too difficult over 32 years to pick out any one thing, but to watch this franchise come into the league, become the pride of Major League Baseball as far as the farm system was concerned, and put that team out in 1979 that was made up mostly of homegrown talent. You know all of the names, and they went on to win 95 games, put themselves on the map, a legitimate contender, and the franchise was really born through the work of the people that put the farm system together, and then what they were able to reap at the major league level. Bad luck cost them in 79, 80, 81, even 82. We'd like to change a few things there, but it was a wonderful time, and at the expense of sounding like I'm repeating myself, it was the halcyon days of the Expos, and they were really a model for all of Major League Baseball. And I don't think any of us that have loved the game or interested in the game should ever forget that. There was a time when this was a great Major League Baseball city, and before that, a great minor league city. Through all of the years of the Montreal Royals, through all of the years of semi-pro baseball, the old Atwater League in Montreal, amateur leagues, baseball at a time back then flourished in this city and really paved the way for the Expos in the late 90s, late 60s.
Michael?
One of my wife would tell you my favorite story to tell about my Expo days is when I almost killed Yuppie. Yeah.
Do tell.
Your failure may have led to the demise of this franchise.
I actually have it on film. I should probably YouTube it. It basically came down to Yuppie taking my glove and going out in the field and messing around and wanting me to throw a ball to him while I picked up the ball and threw a perfect strike. Hit him right in the chest. Well, his chest ended up being his throat. Because his mouth was where his eyes were, so I hit him right in the throat. And he was on the field, he just goes like this. And I turned to my buddies and I said, "Oh my God, I killed Yuppie. I killed Yuppie." And I ran out on the field, and the Yuppie mascot ended up being a friend of mine. His name was Sylvan at the time, and I'm like,
Someone in there?
Yeah, I'm like, Sylvan, are you okay? Are you okay? He's like, he hit me in the throat. He's like, just pretend like you're giving me CPR. Just pretend like. So I start pumping him and like giving him CPR. we ended up carrying him off the field, and everybody thought it was some big skit, and it was real. It was real. I have it on. I probably should YouTube it, huh? I probably should. Yeah, that's my favorite story to tell people about Montreal.
I spent 3 years working for the Expos, the last 3 years, and I'll lead into Serge with my Serge Touchette story, which is one of my funniest stories there. We were at spring training in Lakeland, the Tigers, in 2003. Press box is all in on this gag. Serge goes up to the PR guy for the Tigers, who wasn't much older than me. I think he was like 25 years old, 26. And Serge, you're fine in English, okay, as we all can attest to.
Yeah, sometimes,
But you went to the PR guy and you put on a heavier accent and you said, where are the French game notes, the press notes? And the Tigers guy looked bewildered. He said, well, you have to speak to the Expos guy. The Expos, like, no, the Tigers, you're playing the Expos. You must provide notes in French. and the guy, he turned white, pale as a ghost, and the entire press box erupts in laughter because we were all in on it. And that was just a great time. Serge, what's your fondest memory, if you can name one?
Geez, there's so
something to
many.
take away.
I had a great time covering the team.
It's not standing in your underwear in the
Yeah,
hotel
no,
in
those
Cincinnati. You don't want me to tell that story to you.
You can, I don't mind. There's so many things happened. I had fun. Every year, even when the team was going bad, I had a great time covering the team with the guys. I mean, the players, I had great relationship with some of the players. One thing I remember, there's so many. I remember maybe 79 when the Expos got back. Rusty Stubb was their first star, big star ever. 79, a doubleheader against Pittsburgh. Was a Stubb show up on deck circle, and there was about, I don't know, between 45 and 50,000 people at the stadium, believe it or not. And the crowd gave him the longest standing ovation I ever seen in my life. It lasts, because the Pittsburgh changed pitcher too, so it lasts longer. It lasts over 5 minutes. People standing up and giving that standing ovation. It was something else. I mean, that I will never forget. I still heard the people when I talk about it. It was unbelievable. And of course, the one big thing again was Jerry White home run against the Dodgers in the championship series, the game in Montreal. He gave a 3-run shot of Jerry Royce, 50,000 people again at the park. And I still see the scene, you know, when he hit the ball, the stadium exploded. That's the best way I can describe it. I never seen 15,000 people getting up like this at the same time. It was an unbelievable feeling, and that I still talk to Jerry White about it every time. I saw him a couple of years ago, and he was talking about it, and he had tears in his eyes, you know, because that was the biggest moment of his career, and Jerry White was a great guy, you know. And anyway, but that's one thing I will never forget. But there's so many things, you know, on and off the field, of course. But I had just a great time covering this team. It's too bad it's over.
You like to write that one, the last story?
Absolutely, Jack.
We're in San Francisco in a beautiful new ballpark. Montreal had that ballpark, we still got baseball. 8th inning, close game, we're on the East Coast deadline, so we're writing like mad. Vladimir's at the plate, and the press box, especially the written press box in San Francisco, is very close to the field, too close to the field. All of a sudden, I look up, and a foul off Vladimir's bat is coming right at Touchette's head. I go, whoosh, like this, and I couldn't believe he actually grabbed his laptop before he dove down.
See, I move like this. I was lucky.
There was a sheet of plywood on the row behind us, at least an inch thick. It went, the ball went right through that plywood. But the perfect hole in the wood, so before we went down to the rooms for the post-game post, I wrote, in memoriam, Serge Touchette, and the next year the guys went and it was still there.
We could probably go on for a day. Yeah, can we? Unfortunately, we have a schedule. I want to say thank you. What a great panel. So thank you, guys.